The Man Who Saw the Web. It was the year 2000 when an anonymous figure appeared on early internet forums, a man who called himself John Titor. He claimed he wasn't just another user behind a keyboard, but a soldier from the year 2036, his mission? To travel back in time and retrieve an IBM 5100 computer, a piece of vintage tech he said was crucial for debugging legacy systems in his timeline. At first, people laughed, but the laughter faded fast. Over the next 2 years, John Titor posted messages that were so detailed, so technically precise, and so disturbingly accurate that even scientists began to take notice. He described in near engineering detail how his General Electric C204 time displacement unit worked, a machine supposedly mounted in a 1967 Chevrolet Corvette, later moved into an '87 Chevy Suburban for more cargo space. He didn't just talk about time travel, he broke it down. He explained the many worlds theory of quantum mechanics as if he'd lived it. And the eerie part? Much of what he wrote about would later align with real scientific concepts, but it was his predictions that sent chills through the internet. Titor said that no weapons of mass destruction would ever be found in Iraq, years before that became true. He warned that CERN's Large Hadron Collider would one day produce miniature black holes, an idea confirmed in 2008. He spoke of a future where everyone carried small, powerful computers in their pockets, and connected through social networks long before smartphones or social media existed. Most unsettling of all, he predicted a second American Civil War, a conflict that would begin around 2005, sparked by government crackdowns and growing cultural division. Months before 9/11, he warned that Americans would soon trade their freedoms for safety after a massive terrorist attack. And then there was the IBM revelation. Titor revealed that the IBM 5100 had secret capabilities, hidden functions that allowed it to debug mainframe code. Information no one outside IBM was supposed to know. Years later, a former IBM engineer confirmed that only a few insiders were even aware of it. Titor even shared photographs, showing what he claimed was his time machine, complete with printed manuals and intricate schematics, the kind of detail that would have been nearly impossible to fake in the year 2000. Then, in March 2001, John Titor posted one last message. "I'll be leaving this world line shortly," he wrote. "There are only a few safety checks I need to perform before I go." And just like that, he disappeared. Decades later, many of his words still echo online, predictions about surveillance, social media, and political division that feel hauntingly familiar. So who was John Titor? A brilliant hoaxer with insider knowledge, or a traveler from a fractured timeline, warning us about the world we were destined to create? Either way, his story still bends time itself. The Accidental Time Wanderer. It was a warm June evening in 1950 when the heart of Times Square pulsed with neon light and the chaos of rush hour. Then, out of nowhere, a man appeared, disoriented, confused, and seconds later, struck by a taxi. The police thought it was a tragic but ordinary accident, until they searched his pockets. Inside his wallet was identification for a man named Rudolph Fentz, but everything else made no sense at all. His clothes were straight out of another century, a black frock coat, buttoned boots, and a silk vest that looked like it belonged in the 1870s. Yet the garments were immaculate, as if freshly tailored. In his pockets, old brass buttons, a copper token for a beer at a tavern that hadn't existed since 1876, and $70 in antique banknotes, perfectly crisp, long out of circulation. There were no modern IDs, no recent coins, no documents that tied him to 1950. Nothing. Witnesses swore the man looked utterly bewildered, gazing up at the electric signs and skyscrapers as though he'd stepped into another world. Seconds later, he stumbled into traffic and history. Captain Hubert V. Ream from the Missing Persons Bureau took the case, and what he found turned an accident into an impossibility. In the city's old files from 1876, there was a missing person report for a man named Rudolph Fentz, age 29. He had vanished one evening while taking a walk near his home. The description was exact: the same height, the same face, the same clothes. Digging further, Rim discovered a listing in the 1939 phone directory for a Rudolph Fentz Jr. When contacted, the man said his father had disappeared mysteriously in 1876 and was never seen again. He provided a photograph. It was identical. Every feature matched the man killed in Times Square. The case was quietly buried, too bizarre for the public eye. Yet among the officers who handled it, the whispers never stopped. They'd seen the evidence, the untouched 19th century currency, the pristine Victorian clothing, the matching records, and none of it could be explained. Had Rudolph Fentz somehow slipped through a tear in time, a man walking out of the 19th century straight into the mid-20th, or was it the most elaborate hoax in history, crafted to test the limits of belief itself? Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. For a few brief seconds on a summer night in 1950, a man completely out of time walked the streets of New York City. The Lost Afternoon of Versailles, August 10, 1901, 2. English academics, Anne Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain, set out for what should have been a quiet afternoon, walk through the gardens of the Palace of Versailles. But what they encountered that day would become one of the most haunting and well-documented cases of alleged time travel in history. As they wandered the elegant grounds, something began to change. The sunlight dimmed. The air grew heavy, almost electric. The world around them took on a strange, dreamlike stillness, colors fading, sounds muffled. Then came the figures. Men and women dressed in elaborate 18th century attire, powdered wigs, silk gowns, and tricorn hats, strolling about as though it were completely ordinary. Near the Petit Trianon, the two women noticed a lady in a pale gown sitting on the grass sketching. Her features, her posture, even her distinctive hairstyle, all perfectly matched historical portraits of Marie Antoinette. And the spot where they saw her? Historians later confirmed it was the very place where the Queen had often sat and sketched during the summer of 1789, just months before the French Revolution erupted. The strange encounters continued. Gardeners wielding tools from another century, buildings that hadn't existed for decades, pathways long since erased from the palace grounds. At one point, a man in a dark cloak appeared and sternly warned them to turn back. A man they would later identify as Count de Vaudreuil, one of Marie Antoinette's closest courtiers. That evening, back at their hotel, the women were shaken. But instead of dismissing the event, they approached it like scholars. They began a meticulous investigation that would consume the next 10 years of their lives. Separately, they recorded every detail from memory, the people, the architecture, the layout of the gardens, before comparing notes. Their accounts matched perfectly, and more astonishingly, their descriptions corresponded to historical records of Versailles from 1789, information that wasn't publicly available at the time. They described buildings that had been demolished, trees planted in patterns no longer present, and specific pathways whose locations were confirmed only decades later when old architectural plans resurfaced from private archives. Even the French authorities took notice. Their investigation concluded that the women's observations aligned with details of the palace that had vanished over a century before. In 1911, after a decade of research, Moberly and Jourdain published their findings in a book titled An Adventure. It caused an uproar, praised by spiritualists, condemned by skeptics, and debated by historians worldwide. No one could explain how two modern women could have known so much about 18th century Versailles, or why they seemed to have walked straight into the past. Did they somehow step through a crack in time, catching a final glimpse of Marie Antoinette before her world fell apart? Or did they experience a powerful vision, one that blurred the line between memory, history, and the mysterious fabric of time itself? Whatever the truth, the Versailles time slip remains one of history's most haunting reminders. That perhaps sometimes the past isn't as far away as we think. The Philadelphia Illusion. Summer, 1955. Astronomer and UFO researcher Morris Jessup received a letter that would shake the foundations of everything he believed about space, time, and the limits of human technology. The letter came from a man calling himself Carl Allen, though he would later use the name Carlos Miguel Allende, and what he described was beyond belief. Allen claimed he had witnessed a secret U.S. Navy experiment during World War II, one designed to make a warship invisible. According to his account, he'd been aboard the merchant vessel SS Andrew Furuseth in 1943, docked near the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. There, he saw the USS Eldridge, a Navy destroyer, engulfed in a shimmering green haze. Then, in a blinding flash of light, it vanished, not just from radar, from sight. Seconds later, the ship reappeared, but something about it, and the men aboard, had changed forever. Allen claimed the experiment had gone catastrophically right. Some sailors were found embedded halfway through the ship's metal bulkheads. Others were said to phase in and out of visibility, their bodies flickering like ghosts. And a few, he claimed, became completely unstuck in time, living their lives out of sequence, slipping between moments as if trapped in an endless loop. Allen described encounters with surviving crew members in bars around Philadelphia. Men who would freeze mid-conversation, vanish into thin air, and then reappear minutes later, pale, trembling, and muttering about seeing strange places. Different eras. One sailor reportedly walked through a solid wall and never came back. Another aged decades in a matter of minutes, dying of old age before his horrified crewmates. The Navy, Allen said, covered it all up. The project was buried, the records classified, the crew quietly reassigned. But whatever they'd unleashed couldn't be contained. Some of the men continued to slip through time, appearing and disappearing at random, losing their grip on reality, aging and de-aging unpredictably as their bodies lost sync with the present. What made Allen's claims so haunting was his scientific precision. He described electromagnetic field manipulation and unified field theory, ideas that wouldn't be publicly discussed for decades. His understanding of relativity, space-time distortion, and magnetic cloaking was shockingly advanced for a man with no formal scientific background. When researchers tried to verify his story, they hit a wall. The USS Eldridge's official logs from October 1943 were missing. Many of the supposed crew had either vanished or refused to speak, and newspapers from that year contained cryptic reports of sailors suddenly appearing in bars, confused, terrified, and then gone again. Naval hospital records also told a disturbing story. An unusual surge in psychological breakdowns among destroyer crews stationed in Philadelphia that very same year. So who was Carl Allen? A troubled man spinning impossible tales, or a witness to humanity's first accidental brush with time travel, with the missing ship logs, sealed records, and the chilling consistency of his details? The so-called Philadelphia experiment still stands as one of the most compelling mysteries in modern history. And if Allen's story was true, it means that over 80 years ago, the U.S. Navy might have torn open a hole in time and never truly closed it. The Chaplin Anomaly, Hollywood, 1928. Charlie Chaplin's film The Circus was premiering at Grauman's Chinese Theater, a glittering night of limousines, flashbulbs, and movie stars. Studio cameras rolled to capture the spectacle for history. For decades, the footage sat untouched in archives, until one man spotted something that defied time itself. In 2010, filmmaker and researcher George Clark was studying the old reel frame by frame when he noticed a peculiar figure walking through the background. An older woman, dressed in black, holding a small rectangular object to her ear. She was talking, smiling, listening, exactly as someone would while speaking on a cell phone. But this was 1928. The world wouldn't see mobile phones for nearly 50 years. Clark enhanced the footage digitally, and what he found was undeniable. The object matched the shape and size of a modern smartphone. The woman held it at the precise angle used during a phone call. Her lips moved in rhythm with speech. Even her body language, distracted, focused, slightly hurried, mirrored that of someone deep in conversation. Yet her presence was off in other ways too. Her clothes, though seemingly from the era, didn't quite fit the fashion of the late 1920s. The cut, the stitching, even the fabric hinted at something not of its time. Her hairstyle looked subtly modern, her walk a touch too confident, too contemporary, like someone trying to pass unnoticed in a world that wasn't theirs. Experts were called in to analyze the footage. Kodak technicians verified the film's authenticity. No edits, no overlays, no tampering. The woman was truly there, captured live in 1928. And what's more, other people in the crowd showed small, strange details as well. Clothes that looked authentic until examined closely, revealing modern stitching techniques, synthetic fabrics, and unfamiliar posture, as Clark pointed out. What's most baffling is how no one in the crowd reacts. In 1928, a person speaking into a mysterious black device would have caused an uproar, yet everyone around her acts completely normal, as though she wasn't even there. Investigators tried to identify her. Hollywood historians scoured guest lists, studio records, and archives. No trace. She wasn't a known actress, not part of the staff, and no living witnesses recognized her face. So, who was the woman with the device? A hoaxer decades ahead of her time? A visitor from the future casually attending a silent film premiere? Or something far stranger, a momentary glitch where two eras overlapped, visible only to the camera's eye? Whatever the truth, the footage remains untouched, authentic, and deeply unsettling. Because whether by accident or intention, someone in 1928 was using technology that shouldn't have existed, and the camera caught every second of it. The selfie from tomorrow. It was August 2006 in Kvarn, Sweden. Håkan Nordqvist was simply fixing a leak under his kitchen sink, a routine home repair, when he stumbled upon something that defied all reason. Behind the wall, instead of pipes and wood, he found a tunnel. A passage that, according to his account, led him straight to the year 2042. Unlike most alleged time travelers, Nordqvist didn't just come back with a story. He came back with proof. As he reached into the wall, his arm passed through what should have been solid matter. Curious, he pushed further, crawling through the narrow tunnel that seemed to twist beyond normal space. When he emerged, he was still in his kitchen. Yet everything was subtly different. The space looked futuristic but lived in, familiar, yet wrong. Furniture that adjusted itself, screens that responded to gestures, and appliances that seemed to know what he needed before he touched them. And then he saw himself, sitting comfortably in a chair, watching what looked like a floating three-dimensional screen, was an older version of Håkan Nordqvist, white-haired, calm, and completely unsurprised. The elderly Håkan greeted him warmly, explaining that their meeting was no accident. Time, he said, sometimes folded in on itself, allowing moments like this, rare but real. He'd even chosen to live in the same apartment across decades, expecting this encounter. The older Håkan gave his younger self a tour of the apartment, showing him advances in technology and glimpses of the future world outside. Before they parted, he offered to give him something to prove the experience was real: a tattoo. Using a sleek device that emitted light instead of needles, he etched Håkan's name and birth date onto his arm. There was no pain, no healing, no scarring. The design was unlike anything seen before, a futuristic font with an otherworldly luminescence that modern tattoo artists couldn't replicate. Then came the photograph, a single image that would baffle experts for years. Using a strange, instant-developing camera, the older Håkan snapped a picture of the two of them standing side by side, the same man, decades apart. When analysts examined the photo, they confirmed something startling. Both faces matched perfectly using biometric facial recognition. The older man's features showed natural age progression, complete with micro-details no AI aging software in 2006 could produce. But when investigators searched the apartment, they found no tunnel, no passage, and no evidence of structural tampering. The wall was solid concrete. And yet the tattoo was real, its ink made from compounds and molecular structures unknown to any manufacturer. Håkan never sought fame or fortune. He filed a quiet report, gave occasional interviews, and stuck to his story without exaggeration or contradiction. Doctors found him sane, consistent, and entirely credible. So what really happened in that Swedish kitchen? Did a simple plumbing repair open a portal through time? Or did Håkan Nordqvist experience something far stranger, an overlap between two versions of himself across the boundary of years. Whatever the truth, the evidence he left behind, the tattoo, the photograph, the impossible details, continues to suggest that for one brief moment, the future reached back and left its mark. The Ancient Machine of Time. In 1901, a group of sponge divers off the coast of a small Greek island made a discovery that would rewrite human history. Among the barnacle-covered relics of an ancient Roman shipwreck, they found a corroded lump of bronze and wood, something that, once cleaned and studied, turned out to be utterly impossible. This strange artifact, now known as the Antikythera mechanism, was not a statue, a weapon, or a treasure. It was a machine. Built over 2,000 years ago, around 100 BCE, it functioned as an analog computer, a device of staggering precision and complexity. Through an intricate network of bronze gears, it could track the movement of the sun, moon, and planets, predict eclipses decades in advance, and even mark the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games. But what truly shocked historians and engineers wasn't its function. It was its impossible sophistication. The mechanism's design used differential gearing, a concept that modern scientists believed wasn't invented until the 16th century. Its eclipse prediction model relied on lunar orbital calculations that wouldn't officially be discovered until the work of Johannes Kepler nearly 1,700 years later. And yet, it was there, forged by hand, in bronze, by someone who clearly understood both advanced mathematics and precision engineering. When researchers reconstructed the device, they found evidence that it wasn't the work of a team or a culture, but of one mind. A single unknown genius who possessed knowledge far beyond their time. Modern CT scans of the fragments revealed even more shocking details. Hidden gears and inscriptions that showed the device once tracked all known planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and could accurately forecast their positions decades into the future. To do this required understanding orbital mechanics and irrational numbers, principles not formally known until Copernicus, Kepler, and Newton. It was as if someone had traveled backward through time, bringing scientific insight from the modern age into the heart of ancient Greece. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, that knowledge vanished. No records, no successors, no similar machines. For over 1,000 years, the brilliance behind the Antikythera mechanism disappeared completely from history until it was rediscovered beneath the sea. Who built it? How could anyone in 100 BCE have created something so mathematically perfect, so mechanically precise, that modern scientists still struggle to replicate it? Today, the Antikythera mechanism rests in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, silent, mysterious, and very much out of place. A bronze relic that whispers of one impossible truth, that perhaps, somewhere in ancient Greece, a mind from the future once walked among them. Da Vinci's forbidden blueprints. Leonardo da Vinci died in 1519, but his notebooks, filled with impossible machines and scientific diagrams, suggest knowledge centuries ahead of his time. History celebrates him as a genius of the Renaissance. Yet some of his inventions are so precise, so technically accurate, that they seem to defy the limits of human discovery in the 15th century. In his Codex Atlanticus, Leonardo drew blueprints for helicopters, submarines, parachutes, and even tanks, not vague sketches, but detailed engineering designs with measurements and mechanisms that align with modern physics. His aerial screw, the world's first helicopter concept, demonstrates an understanding of lift, torque, and aerodynamic drag that wouldn't be defined until the 19th century. His anatomical drawings show surgical precision. Leonardo mapped the human heart with details of valve function and blood flow that predate William Harvey's discovery of circulation by over 100 years. His studies of the brain suggest a grasp of neural anatomy centuries before. Neuroscience existed. Even more unsettling are his machines that use technology far beyond the Renaissance, sketches showing ball bearings, internal combustion engines, and even what resembles a steam turbine. His understanding of flight dynamics, center of gravity, and wing control reads more like a 20th century pilot manual than a 15th century experiment. And his military innovations? His tank design features sloped armor, gear-driven propulsion, and an enclosed crew compartment, ideas that wouldn't resurface until modern warfare. His fortress blueprints show angled bastions and interlocking defense lines, anticipating the age of gunpowder by generations. But perhaps the strangest element of all lies in his astronomical writings. Leonardo described the moons of Jupiter, the phases of Venus, and even the Earth's rotation, observations that would only become possible with Galileo's telescope a century later. Some sketches depict lunar craters and Saturn's rings, phenomena invisible with any instrument of his time. Modern analysis of his notebooks reveals another mystery. The most advanced pages appear without any drafts or preliminary studies, as if the ideas arrived fully formed. The handwriting on these pages shows subtle differences from his usual style, and the mathematical work contains equations and notation resembling Newtonian physics. Hundreds of years early, was Leonardo da Vinci simply the greatest intellect in human history? Or was he something far stranger, a man who remembered the future? His notebooks, filled with precision, foresight, and impossible accuracy, feel less like inventions of a dreamer, and more like the blueprints of someone who had already seen what was to come. The portal in Liverpool. Bold Street, in the heart of Liverpool, looks like any ordinary shopping district until you realize it's one of the most active time-slip zones on Earth. Since the 1960s, hundreds of people have claimed to step out of their own time and into the city's past, sometimes for minutes, sometimes just for moments, before reality seems to snap back around them. What makes these accounts so compelling isn't just their number, but their precision. Different witnesses, years apart, describe the exact same scenes, the same eras, and even the same people. The most famous case happened in July 1996. Frank and Carol Sager were out shopping when Frank walked into a bookstore and came out into another world. The street was utterly transformed. The glass storefronts and modern signs were gone, replaced by 1960s-era shops and vintage cars lining the road. People walked past in old-fashioned clothing. Even the air smelled different, cleaner, faintly smoky, like another age. Frank wasn't the only one who noticed. Several others nearby looked just as confused, strangers frozen in disbelief as if they too had stepped into the wrong decade. And then, in an instant, everything flickered. The world snapped back to normal. When researchers checked Frank's story, every detail matched historical records perfectly, even the shop names and architecture that had vanished decades before. He described locations and storefronts no living person could have remembered, but which appeared in forgotten archives. And this wasn't a one-off. In 2008, a woman named Sarah Martinez stepped into what she thought was a trendy new boutique, only to find herself inside a 1970s department store. Wooden counters, bell-bottom staff, vintage merchandise. She tried to buy a dress, but her modern currency confused the cashier. Panicked, she ran outside. And the store was gone. The building she'd entered didn't even exist anymore. Even security footage has hinted at something strange. On camera, pedestrians on Bold Street have been seen abruptly changing direction, dodging invisible obstacles, or speaking to people who aren't there, as if seeing a different reality than the one being filmed. Geologists studying the area found that Bold Street sits above a maze of ancient tunnels and magnetic mineral deposits. Some physicists speculate these could create localized distortions in electromagnetic fields, perhaps even momentary folds in space-time. The incidents follow eerie patterns, usually on overcast, humid days with high atmospheric charge. Witnesses often find themselves transported to the same 2 decades, the 1960s and 1970s, as if they're all glimpsing the same fragment of Liverpool's past, perfectly preserved and looping beneath the surface of time. Are these moments echoes, residual imprints of the city's history bleeding into the present? Whatever they are, the Bold Street time slips remain one of the most documented, consistent, and baffling cases of temporal distortion ever recorded, a reminder that time itself may not be as fixed as we think. The sleeping prophet Edgar Cayce, known to history as the Sleeping Prophet, possessed a gift that defied explanation. While in a deep trance, he could answer questions on medicine, history, and even the future, topics he had no conscious knowledge of. But it was his prophecies that blurred the line between mysticism and time travel itself. Between 1901 and 1944, Casey delivered more than 14,000 predictions, many of which would only come true long after his death. He foresaw technological revolutions, global conflicts, and scientific breakthroughs with uncanny precision. In 1935, Casey described a world where people would instantly communicate across vast distances using small handheld devices. He envisioned a global information network for learning, entertainment, and commerce, eerily accurate depictions of the internet and smartphones decades before they existed. He even warned that these inventions would lead to social isolation and addiction, issues that plague our digital age today. In 1928, he spoke of scientists discovering how hereditary traits are carried in microscopic structures within our cells, an astonishingly early description of DNA. He also predicted the rise of gene editing and stem cell therapy, using language that predated modern genetics by decades. Casey's geological readings were just as striking. He pinpointed oil fields before they were discovered, predicted shifts in global weather, and even suggested that Atlantis would resurface, a claim some now connect to submerged ruins found near the Bimini Islands. Long before the space race, Casey described humans traveling to the moon, space stations orbiting Earth, and even that Mars once had water, all confirmed long after his death. Yet his most profound visions were not about science, but consciousness. He predicted a time when humans would awaken new psychic abilities, when science would prove life after death, and when energy itself would be harnessed through the power of thought. Medical. Studies of Casey's brain activity during his trances showed unusual gamma-wave patterns linked to time perception, as though his mind was literally moving beyond linear time. Was Edgar Casey simply gifted with foresight? Or was he somehow experiencing the future firsthand? His knowledge, impossibly detailed and decades ahead of its time, continues to baffle scientists and historians alike. Perhaps Casey wasn't just predicting the future. He was visiting it. If you enjoyed uncovering the mysteries of time and reality, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Strange Wise, where the impossible becomes possible.